I met my wife a few years ago at a hospital where I went to visit my friend's wife, who just gave birth. Coincidentally, she came in at the same time, but because my friend's wife was asleep, we had to wait in the lobby for about 40 minutes to an hour before she woke up. People who know me well know I am very extroverted and I talk to strangers a lot. While waiting, I tried making jokes with the nurses at the reception desk, but they weren't having it, so I went back to sit with my wife. I tried my best to keep my mouth shut, but we could tell that the silence was awkward, and the moment I started talking, we both busted into a loud laugh. I didn't know she had been observing me, she knew I would try to talk to her. From there, we talked for almost an hour until a nurse came to tell us my friend's wife was awake, and we both went in to see her and her baby. As much as I would love to mention my wife's name, so the people out there can stay away from her, I'd love to keep this anonymous in case any of our friends stumbles on this story. Before we left the hospital that day, I got my wife's number and we started talking. I also followed her on Facebook, and we chatted there all the time. She was gorgeous, and I loved almost everything about her. As of the time we met, she was working at a veterinary shop, and I worked for a construction company. We used to hang out whenever we were free since we were both single and slowly grew fond of each other. One of the reasons I loved my wife was that she was always seeking new ways to improve herself. She read self-help books all the time and listened to all of those personal development podcasts and the rest. Honestly, she also helped me build the habits of reading books and trying to become better, and it made me glad to have a partner who cared about my growth. Fast forward to some months later, we got so close, and we always told each other about what during work. Even without meeting my colleagues at work, she knew their names, roles, and everything that happened during work hours. The same applied to me. I knew everyone's name in the vet clinic she worked at, including the names of the animals that came in daily and those that returned. I was sure she was the one for me at that point, and I asked her out. When she said yes, I asked her to move in with me so we could begin to plan our lives and future together, and she did. She moved in with me, and we became a super couple. I loved her so much that I did everything for her. In fact, I didn't let her contribute to paying rent because I felt it was my responsibility to take care of her. I bought her whatever she wanted, and we went on many fancy dates together. Before I met my wife, I had been in 3 different relationships, but they all cheated on me, and none of my exes cared about me like my wife did, so I believed she was the one for me. In less than 3 months of dating, I met her family, and she met mine too. Our families knew we were dating each other, and we were pretty serious too. So, after 10 months of dating and living with each other, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. Before we got married, we both agreed we would have kids after 3 years of being married, so we could spend time with each other, do the things we loved, and not have to put our lives on hold. Then most importantly, we would have saved enough money to give our children a comfortable life. A year after we got married, nothing changed, and everything was still beautiful and blissful, like when we were still dating. But things began to change between us after we celebrated our 2nd-year anniversary. My wife began to show less interest in the things she used to love, including our 2nd anniversary, which she used to look forward to, and that's when I began to suspect that something was wrong. It all started with her obsession with personal development, and she claimed she found this new mentor online. A man in his late 30s, who she asked to mentor her for a fee, and he agreed. According to my wife, this man was a life coach, and he had mentored many people in the past and helped them build their lives. At first, I didn't have an issue with her having a mentor, because I knew she wouldn't back down or change her mind until she got what she wanted, so I allowed her to do her thing. However, a couple of weeks after she started her mentorship classes with him, I noticed they were getting closer and closer, and I kept feeling that something was off between them, but I shook it off. It wasn't enough that I was paying for the mentorship hourly, but she always came up with new excuses for me to pay for things I didn't understand. She met with her mentor almost every week, and even had to cancel most of our lunch dates to be with him. Then, as if that wasn't enough, whenever I came home from work, I'd have to eat my dinner alone, watch television alone, and go to bed, because she would talk to him for hours on the phone without spending time with me. I complained about it, but she said I was making a mountain out of a molehill, so I let it slide, expecting that she would change, but it got worse. Once, we were supposed to go to my parents' house for my dad's 62nd birthday, but she didn't show up and refused to take my calls. That evening, when I returned home, I met her and her mentor having dinner in her home, and I was so mad. When she saw me, she smiled and acted like everything was fine. It even made me madder when I found out she forgot about her JaVale's birthday, even after I reminded her that morning. The craziest part was that we had not had dinner as a couple for weeks, and she even stopped cooking, but there she was eating and laughing with her mentor. I got so mad and yelled at her, then I asked her mentor to leave, but she stood up and started challenging me in front of her mentor. She said he had taught her a lot of things, and he could not leave, so I had to choose between joining them for dinner or doing something else. I was so furious that I left the house and returned to spend the night at my parents' house. That night, I stayed awake close to my phone, hoping she would call and beg me, but she didn't, and that was when I was forced to look up her mentor online. To my greatest surprise, I spent hours digging and could not find anything related to mentorship or personal development about him. When I was frustrated at finding nothing, I hired a private investigator to investigate him. Weeks after digging, the PI I hired discovered he was a convicted felon and a master manipulator with arrest warrants. I could not even believe it. The PI could not find anything related to mentorship with him, and that's when I realized that my wife had been playing me for months. She was getting money from me and giving it to her lover as his payment while I worked my ass off to give her a better life. I collected all the evidence from my PI and paid him off. The next day, I went home early so I could meet my wife at home and show her all of the evidence, but I caught them doing it on my couch and I was enraged. I hit him before I threw the evidence on the table, and my wife did not look surprised. It was an indication that she knew everything about him. She then started begging for forgiveness and asked me not to say anything. I told them I had contacted the police and she should go ahead and marry her lover and rot in jail for all I care. While I was yelling at them, the police arrived at my house and took him away. Immediately he was taken away, she went on her knees and began to beg me. She said he manipulated her, but since he was out of the picture, we could return to how we were. Hearing that made me madder, so I kicked her out and called her parents to let them know their daughter would be coming home soon and we weren't together anymore. Months later, we divorced and we went our separate ways. Until the last 6 months, she kept calling me with different numbers, until I warned her that we could never be together, even if it were in her next life. Of course, I miss her, but being single is way better than living with a cheating spouse. Even the last few months of our marriage were hell for me, so I'm glad I made the right decision. OP, I wonder why you didn't look up your wife's mentor before she started her mentorship classes. That was carelessness on your own part. It's just terrible that she played you and manipulated you to pay for classes that did not exist. Although it's hard, you made the right decision by kicking her out of your house and divorcing her. Such a woman does not deserve second chances because she would have cheated on you again, even if you forgave her. It's even more disturbing that she didn't show any remorse when you showed her the pieces of evidence, but most importantly, she is no longer in your life. Thank you for sharing with us. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I fell apart after 2 years of marriage. My wife and I started dating around 2020 after the coronavirus struck the world. She had lost her family of 3 to the virus, and as her closest family friend, I had no other option than to take her in. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. One was my bedroom and the other was my office because I was already working remotely for a top freelancing platform whose name I would be withholding, and I had to move my office to my bedroom so she could sleep in the second room. When she moved in, she was grieving, always moody, and almost depressed, and I took up the responsibility of caring for her all through her stay with me. At that time, I was earning very well, so I didn't need her to contribute to anything, not even groceries. She barely ate and was not herself for the first few months. 7 months later, she snapped out of her mourning state and became active again. Then she started looking for a job. The main reason she wanted a job was to pay me back for all the things I had done for her, but when I found out, I stopped her from working and suggested that she learn a high-demand skill so she could register on the same platform I worked at and also earn remotely. She agreed and I paid for an expensive course for her and she mastered the skill. In the following months, she registered on the platform and began to get her own clients, and that was how we became 2 remote workers living together. When my wife moved in with me after she lost her parents, I had just broken up from a toxic relationship, and the last thing I wanted was a relationship. But having my wife in the house all the time helped me in some way and caused me to reevaluate the important things in life. So, in the process of her living with me, I fell in love with her even without knowing. With her becoming active again, our relationship grew stronger, and we even became closer. I literally became her only friend and family, and slowly, we started doing the things only couples did. We went on vacations together because we were both financially stable, got each other gifts, visited the places we always wanted to, and we even took more advanced courses to help us in our skills. After living together for 2 years, the neighbors and those who stayed or worked around our house knew we were together, even when I had not asked her out yet. I knew she loved me, but I was afraid she would turn me down because she kept saying she was tired of people coming into her life and leaving her when she needed them the most. So, I kept procrastinating. Eventually, I asked her out on her 27th birthday. We weren't doing anything that year, we only went to have a fancy dinner, and while we were in the restaurant, I paid the waiter to bring in a cake I had delivered some hours before we went there, and instead of having happy birthday, it had "Will you be my girlfriend?" and she said yes in excitement. Initially, I intended to propose to her, but I wanted to ask her out first. 4 months later, after she said yes to me, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. My parents already knew her because her late family and my family were friends, and they were delighted when they found out we were getting married. We made the wedding plans and had a small wedding, then moved into a bigger apartment with enough space for our respective workspace. When we moved into this new apartment, my wife was jovial and always in high spirits with the neighbors. The neighbors, too, were receptive and welcoming, unlike my former neighbors, who were always busy and barely had time to speak or talk with us for more than 5 minutes. When this happened, I was delighted because she had a different happiness spending time with the neighbors, especially since she lost her family and barely interacted with others except my family and me. She even started cooking and sharing food with the neighbors and their kids, and it contributed to their closeness. Being remote workers allowed us to create our own work timetable, and whenever she was done working, she would go grocery shopping and come back home to cook. She claimed that cooking helped her clear her head, and sharing food with other people reminded her of her family reunions and much more. I understood her point of view, so I didn't argue with her or try to stop her, even when some of the neighbors started taking advantage of her kind gesture. Aside from the food, some neighbors began to ask for financial assistance, which we helped whenever we could, and there was this 80-year-old man who asked if she could help him cook on some evenings and clean his house, too, since he had no family living with him. So when my wife told me about it, I reluctantly agreed, and she'd go over to his house twice or thrice a week to cook and clean. About a month after she started cooking and cleaning for him, I noticed she went there almost every evening except on weekends. This was more often than their initial agreement, but I thought everything was okay. Then one day, I was in my apartment watching television when I heard a knock on the door. I knew it was unlike my wife to knock when she had her keys, so I opened the door and realized it was our neighbor she cooked for. When I saw him, I thought he had come to thank me and my wife for her help, but he looked somewhat disturbed. When he sat, and I asked him if everything was okay, he first said, "Son, I want your wife to stop coming over to my house because she is having an affair with my renter." Then he stopped and looked at me. I was shocked to hear that and didn't know what to say. I asked him if he was telling the truth, and he admitted that he had no reason to lie. When we were having this discussion in my apartment, my wife had gone grocery shopping to cook the next day, so she wasn't at home. I didn't want to believe the old man, but like he said, he had no reason to lie, and it made no sense for him to lie against my wife. So in the end, I asked him if he could show me something to prove that he was telling the truth, and he promised to make a video and send it to me when next she came over, which would be her last time visiting his house. That evening, when my wife came back, I didn't mention anything to her. I just acted like everything was fine, and I didn't say that the old man came over when she was away. The next evening, she told me she was going there as usual, and I pretended to not pay any attention and acted like I was engrossed with my work. About 15 minutes after she left, the old man sent me a video of my wife in his renter's room, and they were making out in the living room, thinking he was asleep in his room. When I saw the video, I was broken. I knew the man she was kissing and could not believe she had done that to me. I thanked him and told him I'd be locking her out of the house, and he promised to do the same because his renter was late on rent payment and he had enough of him. Later that evening, when my wife came home and could not access the house, she started to yell and hit the door, but I sent her the same video, and she began to beg me from outside. She asked me to open the door to discuss things, but I was done with her. She betrayed me and did not care about my feelings. On the other end, her lover was kicked out by the old man, and they were both homeless that evening. I refused to let her in that night, and after a few days, she returned to meet her stuff packed at one corner of the house, but she refused to leave. I called the police because she was disturbing my peace and the neighbor's peace, and she was taken away. About 2 months later, I divorced her, and she cried bitterly. She tried to emotionally blackmail me into staying with her, but I had enough of her nonsense. She said something about me being the only person she had left in the world, but I reminded her she had her lover now, and I cut all ties with her. It turned out that her lover was an illegal immigrant, and he fled the country when I threatened to arrest him on the day my wife came to pick up her things. So in the end, he left her, and she had no one else to turn to. It's been a couple of months, and I still feel stupid for being played like that, but I'm way better now, and I don't think I'll be ready to be in a relationship anytime soon. OP, you ended up with bad people in the past, and they took your love for granted. You should even be glad that your wife eventually showed her true colors early in the marriage and didn't lead you on for years. It would have been more heartbreaking with time. Consider yourself lucky to have a nice neighbor who could not watch your wife cheat on you. I know you did a lot for her, but this has nothing to do with you being at fault. I'm glad you made the right decision. Wish you all the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. To start from the beginning, she and I have been together for over 10 years, but we have been married for 7. We met while we were in high school, and we had been together ever since. She was the only woman that I'd ever been with, and I thought that I was the only man she'd ever been with. We've had a good life together. We have raised 3 children, we own our own home, and we even have a vacation home in Florida that we go to every summer. It was almost like we were living the American dream. As we've gotten older, and as we've been focused on work and the kids, our sex life has sort of diminished. It wasn't completely inactive, but it wasn't as vibrant as either of us probably hoped it could be. She was always exhausted after taking care of the kids, and after long days in the office, I was also tired. I started to notice that she was acting off. She had never been someone to care a lot about her physical appearance. I thought she was naturally beautiful, and I loved everything about her. She didn't have to wear makeup around me. She didn't have to dress nicely. I thought she was stunning with a clean face and sweatpants. However, she started going to the gym. She was petite, and after 3 kids, she had more curves, and I guess she wanted to try to lose that weight. I cannot stress enough that I never encouraged her to go. She was my wife, and I loved her. The changes in her body were from carrying our children inside of her. I didn't mind them. On top of that, she was dressing up more. She was wearing nice dresses and newer clothes. It reminded me of what she wore when we first started dating. I asked her about it, and she just told me that it was to help her feel more confident in herself. I took that explanation to heart. She had never done anything to make me think otherwise, so I assumed she just needed a little boost. A few weeks after we had that conversation, I noticed that she was very secretive with her phone. I had read way too many other Reddit stories to feel comfortable with knowing how sketchy she was being with her phone, so thinking we had a good communication line between us, I asked her about it. She told me that I was overreacting, and that she wasn't doing anything on her phone. I didn't want to ask her to see it, because I didn't want to cause an argument about not trusting her. She unlocked it and handed it to me, but I thought that was enough, so I just shook my head and apologized. One night, she told me that she was going to a book club that a local bookstore was hosting and left. I thought that she might be gone for maybe 2 hours. She didn't come back until 4 hours later. When I asked her where she was, she just told me she got some drinks with a couple of the girls after. Out of curiosity, I checked the bookstore's website and found out that they didn't have a book club meeting on the calendar. I'd had enough of her lies, so I figured if she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I would find it. My gut was telling me there was something wrong. I looked online and found a private investigator who I reached out to via email, and they agreed to take on my case. About a week later, she came back to me with the exact same story about the book club. I emailed the investigator and told him right away about the chance to catch her, so he jumped on the opportunity to see what she was doing. I stayed home, anxiously awaiting any news from the investigator. My wife came home over 4 hours later. Not long after, I got a phone call from the investigator, so I excused myself and took the call outside. He told me that he followed my wife to a house where a man greeted her, kissing her on the lips when he did, and they both stayed inside for several hours. He was able to look up the owner of the house, and he had a name. Furthermore, when he did a search for the man online, he was able to find pictures he posted on a kink forum. The more he looked into his followers, people reacting to his posts, and she found a profile that belonged to my wife. I was completely shocked and heartbroken. On top of that, I was alarmed at how she would meet some random man off the internet and ruin our marriage by being with him. I needed to see what was going on between them exactly, so I waited for my wife to go to sleep, and I logged into her computer to try and get into the account. As luck would have it, she was logged in already, so I didn't have to do much hacking. I didn't know if the man she had gone to sleep with was the only one, but there were many other explicit message chains between her and strange men. I gathered screenshots of the most explicit parts, especially the parts where she had been sending pictures of herself to these men. There was no chance of reconciliation after this. She had thrown away our marriage for some meaningless fling. It was unforgivable. We had a family reunion coming up in a couple of weeks, so I thought that would be the best time to tell her about the news. If she was going to throw away our marriage, I was going to make sure she would regret it. The weeks passed, and I was just staying late at work and trying to avoid her as much as possible. It was hard to look at her knowing she had some of the conversations she did with those men. I had the divorce papers ready by the time the family reunion came around. All of the kids were playing in the pool or by the play set, while the adults sat around the table and had a few drinks and ate some barbecue. I stood up, asking for everyone's attention, and I turned to my wife and told her I was leaving her. There was a gasp from the crowd, and I handed her the papers that I brought with me. I explained to her and everybody else watching that I found the messages she was exchanging online, and I had reason to believe that she had cheated on me with one of those men. She dragged me away from the table and was fuming because of how humiliated she was. She tried to explain to me that she had never cheated on me, and that the messages were just from her curiosity about certain things. She swore up and down she never acted on anything, but then when I brought up her kissing another man at their house, she was silent. We went through filing for the divorce, and she didn't ask for anything from me. If she had, she wouldn't have been awarded it because she was the one who cheated. The divorce was entirely her fault. She ended up moving in with her grandma and helping her dad around. We have joint custody of the kids, but they tend to want to spend more time with me. My private investigator was able to do some digging on the man as well. As it turned out, he was married and had several children of his own. I considered not getting involved, but it was the right thing to do. I found his wife, and I showed her some of the evidence of their affair, and she ended up leaving him. She kept the house, she kept the kids, and she's getting spousal support from him. Now I'm trying to figure out how to get back into the scene. I've only dated one woman, and it ended pretty badly. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. It's hard to believe that somebody would take such a good life and throw it all away for nothing. On top of that, it sounds like she had a loving, caring husband who would have listened to what she said had she addressed these desires with you. You should always trust your gut instinct with things like this. She tried to lie and mislead you when you brought up your concerns. It was the right move to hire the investigator when you thought there was something wrong. It's just such a shame what they discovered. I know dating after being with somebody for so long can be daunting, but hopefully you can get back out there and find somebody who will truly value you. I wish you the best. Now, let's move on to our next story. My wife and I met in college, both young and full of dreams. Sparks flew instantly, and before we knew it, we were inseparable. Fast forward a bit, and we've been together for a solid 12 years. We have 2 beautiful kids, a cozy home we call our own, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. My wife has always been a bit of a health nut. She is very passionate about clean living. She eats a plant-based lifestyle. She works out religiously, and she enforces a lot of these rules on our children so they can be healthy. I wasn't like that at all before we met. In fact, I grew up very poor in a food desert in America, so I wasn't used to eating organic, fresh foods like she was. When we got together, I made some adjustments to my lifestyle, but there was a bit of compromise between us because I am unable to have a completely plant-based diet for my own health reasons. I work a mostly sedentary job in an office, though I do try to go for long walks or jog when I can. My wife, however, works as a personal trainer and nutritionist. She works at a gym near us that offers a lot of specialty classes for the members. She had been there for years. She was almost a staple of the gym to a lot of the older clients. I never had a reason to worry about what she was doing at work before. My wife was hot. I knew a lot of guys that came there to work out were probably hitting on her, but I trusted her. One day, she came home from work exhausted and annoyed. I asked about what was bothering her, and she told me that they hired a new trainer that was completely inept at their job. On top of her normal classes, they were having her train him on how to train others. It just seemed redundant, and she was pretty annoyed that they just didn't hire somebody who was capable. The first few days that she was training this new hire, she would come home and complain about how annoying he was and how it seemed like he wasn't actually paying attention to her while she was training him. But sooner or later, that complaining stopped. I didn't necessarily notice it at first. She just stopped talking about him. A few weeks after he started, we were at dinner, and I asked her how it was going with him. She seemed surprised that I asked, but she just shrunk it off and said that he's teaching his own class now, and sometimes she has to sit in on them to make sure he's up to par. It seemed like she started acting off just out of the blue. She was spending more time at the gym, she was wearing skimpier clothes out, and she was being distant and secretive. I had a feeling that there was something wrong between us, but I didn't know how to ask. As time went on, I only noticed things getting worse, so I bit the bullet and I just outright asked her if there was something going on that I didn't know about. She laughed at me and told me that I was being silly for thinking something was happening. She loved me, and she wouldn't hurt me. It felt good to hear that reassurance when I had been somewhat insecure about our relationship in the weeks prior. For a few days, things were different, and it felt like she was being more aware of how she was acting around me, but then things just reverted back to how they were. I got really concerned when she told me that she was going to be teaching some evening classes at the gym. Ever since we had the kids, we had both been firm with our jobs about how we wouldn't be working any nights because we wanted to spend time with our family. We actually ended up having a huge argument about that because I felt like she had made a huge decision without me, but she told me that it was only going to be for a few months, and it wasn't every night, so I just accepted it. She had been teaching that class for about 2 weeks. One night after she had made dinner, I noticed that she left her phone behind before she left. I told my oldest child to keep a close eye on the younger one so I could quickly run it over to the gym so she wouldn't be without it. When I got there, it was practically empty. There were a few other members on the machinery, but it was clear that there was no class taking place. As I said, my wife had been working there for 12 years, so I knew the workers pretty well. I explained to the front desk worker that I had my wife's phone, but they told me that she wasn't there. That seemed strange. She told me she had a class, so I believed she was there. They told me that they could have been wrong, but they hadn't seen her all night. They gave me the go-ahead to go look through the employee section. I walked back and made my way through the maze of lockers to find the offices and break room. I didn't see her anywhere there. It was clear to me then that she had lied to me about going to the gym. All of the feelings and worries had come back, and I didn't know what to do. Then it hit me. I was holding her phone in my hands. I hadn't even thought about going through it before, but it was clear to me that I needed to. I looked through it, and I found videos, pictures, and explicit details about her affair with the new trainer. I was absolutely shocked by what I'd seen. I had my suspicions, but confirming them felt like I was being stabbed in the chest. When I finally got back to my senses, I screenshotted a bunch of the messages and sent them to myself before deleting them from her phone. The closer I looked at some of the pictures, I could see that they had been sleeping together at the gym. My wife loved her job almost as much as she loved our kids. It truly meant the world to her. She had taken my happiness away, so I was going to take it from her too. I knew her boss, so I contacted him and told him about what I discovered. When I told him they had been sleeping together at the gym, he was disgusted. He was shocked that his employees would do something like that. I know it was a hasty decision to tell her boss before I even told her, but it was the right thing to do. I went back home and went to bed, intending to ignore my wife completely. The next day I got home from work, and my wife was there completely distraught. She told me that she was let go from work. She told me she had no idea why, but I had a strong suspicion that if her boss fired her they would have told her exactly why. She was clearly still trying to lie to me. I took that as an opportunity to elaborate on her recent termination. I told her all about what I had discovered, and how I called her boss to tell him that they had been having sex at the job. She was shocked that I knew, but all I did was tell her that it was over between us. She begged me not to go through with that. She didn't have a job to support herself or the kids, and she didn't want to be without me. I told her that I'd made up my mind, and that she wouldn't have to worry about supporting the kids because I was going to try to get custody of them. We ended up going through with the divorce. Both she and the trainer were fired from their job and forced to work elsewhere. Because my wife was fired for sleeping with somebody else on the job, it was difficult for her to use the only employment she had for the past 12 years on her resume. So, it was difficult for her to land another one. Eventually she did, but it paid about a third of what she was making before. I got full custody of the kids, and she has visitation of them every weekend, and she gets them on some holidays. She's living with her mom and stepdad now while she tries to figure out a way to save money for her own place. OP, I can't believe you went through something like that. It definitely seems like you had your concerns and brought them up to her, and she treated you like they meant nothing. She knew she was doing something wrong, but she continued to lie about it. It's good that her boss didn't allow either of them to stay working after discovering they had used the gym as a place to be together. It feels like karma definitely got the best of her in the end when she couldn't find another job. A 12-year gap on a resume is quite some time, and that's got to be hard to explain during an interview. It's good that you were able to get custody of the children, and I hope you guys are all coping well with the changes you've endured. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My ex and I divorced after 3 years of marriage. The first time I met my ex-wife was at a baking fest where she and her friends came to support one of the competitors, who was also her friend, and I happened to be her friend's cousin, the competitor. We got along well from that first night, but I didn't think we would see each other after that. Not until she coincidentally popped up on my Facebook's People You May Know, and I sent her a friend request. Luckily for both of us, she was online that evening, and she accepted my friend's request that night, and we started talking. From our conversation, I found out that she was a fresh college graduate, and she was job hunting at the moment, but she also worked part-time at a restaurant to pay her bills. I was into real estate myself, and my job required that I traveled almost all the time to check out clients' property and meet with clients who wanted to buy or sell too. I told her about myself too, and we seemed to get along. When we met, I had been single for more than 4 years, and was looking for a partner, possibly a life partner, but I wasn't looking for the kind of girl who would be with me just because I was doing well financially. I wanted someone who actually loved me, and because of that, I lied about a couple of things I told her while I talked that night. As time passed, we continued to hang out often whenever I was in town, and I fell in love with her as we continued to see each other, and in less than 3 months of always hanging out, I asked her out, and she said yes. It was after she said yes to me that I began to open up to her, and this was because I was getting more comfortable with her and being around her. Since I was always barely in town and rented a comfortable apartment, I asked her to move in with me so we could always be together, and she agreed. Right from when we started talking on Facebook, I told my best friend about her and how much I liked her, and he encouraged me to make things work out between us, which it did, and since I was only sometimes in town, I would ask him to occasionally stop by the house on his way back from work and check on her for me. She became my world, and I adored everything about her. Her smile was infectious, bringing life to every room she stepped into. Even my mom, who was selective regarding women, loved her at first sight. After searching for a job for a long time, she could not find one. I asked her to stop hunting and started giving her money monthly. It was equivalent to the salary she would get if she worked, and I even added bonuses every time she made me happy. So, all she did was stay home, hang out with her friends, or do whatever she wanted aside from working. Our intimate life was great, and it was really one of the things I loved about her. When we met new, we explored together, and she always had a way of driving me crazy in bed. While all this happened, I bragged about her to my best friend, and I kept telling him how lucky I was to have met the perfect woman. He even advised me to propose to her, since I was the only bachelor in our circle, and he helped me pick the perfect ring. My wife and I dated for a couple of years before I popped the question, and she said yes. We had a beautiful wedding, and for our honeymoon, we went to a tropical island she had always been crazy about. Our honeymoon was a gift from my fellow realtors, including my best friend, and it was just amazing. Before marriage, we had agreed to not have kids immediately, because I understood we would have to pause our lives for a while to raise a child, and I didn't want that. I wanted to enjoy myself with my wife before a child came, so we agreed to start having kids after 3 years, and after she continued taking her birth control pills. The first 2 years of our marriage were great, and I had the best memories from them. We did literally everything together when I was around. We ate, had baths, shopped, and took trips together. We even learned new skills and did our first skydiving together. I ensured that whenever I was at home with my ex-wife, I showered her with gifts and so much love, and we would even go over to my best friend's house for dinner, or he would come over with his family. I loved that the relationship between my wife and best friend was getting more solid, and I loved to see them get along with each other, just like the big happy family I wanted us to be. I also loved that my best friend's wife and my wife were always together, and they did most of their shopping together. The only difference between me and my best friend was that he stayed out late, and his wife began to suspect that he was seeing someone because he began to neglect her, and he was always on his phone. I didn't really think my best friend was seeing anyone because being a realtor required that he meet all kinds of people, including women. I didn't even ask him about it because I'd been with him since we were children, and I knew he was a one-woman man. Everything was going fine between our two families until one day, my ex-wife and I were at this rich folks' party I was invited to, and unfortunately, my battery died there. I had to make an important call for a deal I was about to seal, so I asked my ex-wife to lend me her phone, and she did. She was busy talking to people at the party, so she didn't even notice when I walked to a quiet place. I typed the number on her phone, and to my greatest surprise, the name Sugar popped on her screen. Funnily enough, it was my best friend's number, which made me curious. I knew it was weird for her to save his number that way. Many thoughts ran through my head at that moment, and I was forced to go through her WhatsApp after struggling internally for minutes. I found texts like "I miss you" and "I had fun the last time," which made things more suspicious. After I saw my best friend's number saved as Sugar in my ex-wife's phone, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was happening between them. She was always talking about him, and even when I told her that his wife suspected she was seeing someone, she acted very concerned and kept asking if she knew who the person was. I also wanted to prove myself wrong, so I hired a private investigator to follow her around. In the end, the private investigator followed her for weeks, and indeed, my ex-wife was having an affair with my best friend. The private investigator took pictures of them hanging out at night whenever I traveled. I was always traveling. They went to the movies together, cuddled each other in restaurants, and even spent nights in a hotel. Then he would drop my wife and return back to his wife. I was literally in tears when I saw the pictures and the videos. It was the height of betrayal any man could take. There was nothing I didn't do to make my wife happy, but she betrayed me. So, a few days after I learned the truth, I pretended to travel out of town and notified them about it. I knew they would hang out together that night, and they did. That evening, I waited in the PI's car and watched them as they returned from grocery shopping and walked into my house. I waited for almost 30 minutes outside before I ran into my house. I opened the door, and we caught them on the couch naked. The PI was with me, and he had his phone camera on. When they saw us, they scrambled for their clothes first, and then my ex-wife began to. Everything happened so fast, and I couldn't help but punch my best friend in the face. At the same time, my best friend's wife walked in on us fighting, and she began to yell at him and hit him when she saw him naked. I told her everything I found on the phone before I went into my house and asked her to come over to my house if she wanted to see things for herself. I kicked my wife and best friend out of my house that night, and I posted the video of them I recorded on social media and tagged them. It went viral, but I didn't care. I also sent the video to my former mother-in-law, and she was so embarrassed and disappointed. I contacted a lawyer from the day the PI turned in the evidence, and he helped process the divorce papers, which we divorced months later. My best friend's wife also divorced my best friend, and she won custody of their kids. As a result of that, he became miserable and depressed. After our divorce, my ex-wife dropped by the house several times, begging that I take her back. She had obviously tasted suffering and realized how much I made life easier for her when she was with me. She admitted that they had been dating for almost 2 years, and she did it because my best friend told her I was cheating on her, but I wasn't buying any of her excuses. I threatened that she would pay me back every money she owed if she showed up again, and that was the last time I saw her. I stopped talking with my best friend, and we stopped doing business together. It has been years now, and I have moved on, but I don't think I'll have a best friend or a woman I can trust anytime soon. OP, what your best friend and wife did to you was devastating. Such people should not be given second chances in your life. They were the 2 closest people in your life, yet they broke your trust and betrayed you in the worst possible way. I'm also glad you didn't ignore your wife and forgive your best friend, because that would be silly. He also contributed 100% to the betrayal, despite being your childhood friend. You did the right thing by cutting them off. You don't have to keep doing business with your best friend when you can do business with thousands of realtors. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I wish you all the best. Now let's move on to the second story for today. I, 28 male, and my ex-girlfriend, 25 female, were a typical example of 2 lovebirds. I am an Uber driver, and I have been driving for more than 6 years now. Through driving as a part-time job, I could assist myself financially through college and settle things in other areas of my life. My ex-girlfriend and I first met after she ordered a ride, and I was her driver. We only talked a little that day because I had a policy of not engaging young female customers. Otherwise, we would get too close and they would always expect free rides. But later that night, after I got home and was cleaning my car, I discovered that she had forgotten one of those small-sized mail wallets in my car and had her ID in it. As soon as I saw her ID, I remembered her and called to tell her I found her wallet in my car. From how she responded, it was obvious that she had been looking for the wallet, and she asked if I could help her drop it at her house the next day, and she would pay for the ride. I agreed to that, and the next day, I drove down to her place and returned her wallet. It was late in the evening, and we talked over a can of beer. It was her way of saying thank you, but in the process of talking, we found out that we had so much in common, and I offered to be her personal driver just in case she needed to go somewhere. Long story short, from being her new personal driver, we slowly got closer to each other, and we started going on dates. We were both single at the time, so we didn't have any reason to hold back, and besides, we saw it as only getting to know each other and nothing more. But we didn't know that we would end up sharing the same bed a few times, and from there, we would be in a relationship. We dated for 4 years, and even before our relationship was 6 months old, I had known her parents and the rest of her family members, and she met mine too. Our families knew we were in a relationship, but they kicked against her moving in with me until we were officially married. So during our 4 years of being together, she could only spend the weekends and sleep over on some nights because her parents insisted that she live with them until I married her out of their home, so we had to respect that. Aside from getting her dream job, she got a promotion in less than 2 years of working with her organization, and this was great news for both of us. The only wrong side was that she had to handle more projects, and she had more workload than she used to. In her organization, there was this guy my ex-girlfriend used to talk about a lot. She talked about how intelligent he was, and how the organization was so proud of him after he sealed a mega deal, and all I can remember was that she was so happy when she found out she had been paired with him to work on the project they were assigned. About a month after she started working on this project with her partner, I noticed many things had changed between us. First, she was always too tired to go on a date with me or come over to see me at my apartment like we agreed to twice every week. Also, we used to video call each other every day while working. It either had to be during her break time or mine, but after the project began, she stopped taking my video calls. Instead, she would text back and tell me she was busy, and she would call me later, which she never did. When her attitude towards me kept getting worse, I felt it was because I had not made a move yet, especially since we had already dated for 4 years, so I bought a ring. I wanted to propose to her so she wouldn't feel I was unserious. I intended to propose to her on her 26th birthday, but I found something shocking a week before her birthday. On that day, a customer ordered a ride to a fancy restaurant, and after I dropped the customer at the location at around 8 p.m., I saw my ex-girlfriend and her colleague from work coming out of the restaurant with a takeout bag. She was holding the bag, and he wrapped his right arm around her waist like they were a couple, and I felt butterflies in my stomach. They did not see me, and I watched them as they hopped into his car, kissed each other after they got in, and drove away. Immediately they drove off, I followed them. He drove her to the parking lot of a hair salon. They stepped out and kissed, then she got into her car and went home. I was heartbroken, but I had to put myself together, and I could take pictures of them kissing from where I parked my car. After they left for their different destinations, I sat in my car and laughed. It was a combination of tears and laughter, but I laughed the most. I was so pained that she chose to cheat and threw away everything we suffered to build. I had sacrificed a lot of things for her, but it seemed like that wasn't enough for her. The following day was one of the days we agreed she would be sleeping over, and I called her to come over to my place because I needed someone to talk to. I told her I was depressed, and knowing that I had issues of depression in the past, she came over. Throughout that night, I kept brooding over what I had seen, but didn't confront her. Instead, I asked about her project and how everything was at work, as I always did. That night when she slept, I was able to unlock her phone and found chats between her and her colleague. There were chats of them saying things to themselves and even saying ill things about the company they worked for. The sweetest part was the chats contained their nudes, and I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my phone, then cleared the traces. Before she left for work the next day, I asked her if she could leave her new purse. I got it for her, so I could take it to the store and get the same one for my mom as her birthday gift, and she did. When she left for work, I printed many copies of the chat I took from her phone and went to the organization she worked for. Her colleagues already knew me, so they received me well. When I got there, they told me she was having a presentation, so I used the opportunity to share the chats with everyone, and they were all in shock. When she came out, she was concerned that everyone was glaring at her, and when I handed her a copy of the chat, she stood there dumbfounded. Without wasting time, I told her it was over, then asked her for her car key. I gave her my first car, and I walked out on everyone who gathered. She was very embarrassed, and she even tried to follow me. I was satisfied with her public humiliation, and I wanted her to have a taste of what it felt like to commit fully to something and have someone destroy it without thinking. She was eventually fired, as well as her lover, but he cut ties with her because he was already married, and he did not want her to ruin the rest of his life. When her parents found out what she had done, they were very disappointed, and they even tried to call me to work things out, but I blocked their numbers, including hers. I never saw her again, and I hope I never do. I still regret wasting my time, resources, love, and everything I did to make that relationship work. She hurt me so much, and up till now, I still struggle with the thought that every woman out there will treat me the same way she did. A woman who cheats on you once can cheat on you again, and if she could do this after 4 years of being in a relationship, imagine how much more after several years of marriage. Don't let anyone manipulate you into getting back with them. I am very proud of how you handled this situation. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've been happily married to my awesome wife, Ella, who's 25 for about 3 years now. We're the kind of couple who knows each other so well that we finish each other's sentences and laugh at each other's silly jokes. Life has been pretty great, or at least that's what I believed. Recently though, I couldn't help but notice that Ella has been acting a bit strange. She started staying late at work more often and became all secretive about her phone. It might sound weird, but call it a gut feeling or just intuition, I had this hunch that something might not be quite right. After weeks of trying to push away those troubling thoughts, I finally decided to confront the situation head-on. It was nerve-wracking, but I knew I needed to find the truth, even if it meant facing some painful realities. Late one night, while she was asleep, I planned to check her phone and go through her messages and apps. I had never done something like this before, but I hoped it would give me some clarity, and deep down, I prayed that my gut instincts were wrong. As I was swiping through her photo gallery, my heart sank when I saw a picture of her with an unfamiliar man kissing her cheek. I couldn't help but think, what on earth is going on? Why would she do this if she was happy with me? My curiosity led me to read her messages, and that's when I discovered a chat with a guy named Jacob. They had been meeting up at hotels, and their conversation was filled with very explicit and intimate details. It was a painful and shocking revelation that left me feeling betrayed and hurt. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but now I needed to figure out how to confront her and talk about what I had discovered. I was feeling a whirlwind of emotions, furious and heartbroken at the same time. The person I loved the most had betrayed me by cheating with another man. Trying to process it all, I decided to sleep on it and confront Ella in the morning. When morning came, she looked really stressed and anxious. She must have noticed that her phone was moved from her usual spot on the bedside table. Annoyed, she asked me if I had gone through her phone. With a calm expression, I told her to stop pretending, because I already knew she had been cheating on me. To my complete surprise, Ella broke down and admitted that she had cheated, because she felt bored with her life and Jacob, the other man, was also married. She went on to reveal that they were in love, and that Jacob's wife had no idea about their affair. As she divulged more and more details, my heart sank, and it felt like my world was collapsing around me. It was after that moment that I felt a sense of responsibility not only to myself, but also to Jacob's unsuspecting wife, Mandy. She deserved to know the truth about what was happening. So, I made up my mind to talk to Mandy about everything. I knew it wouldn't be an easy conversation, but I couldn't let her continue living in the dark. To reach out to her, I reached out to her on social media after finding out Jacob's social media when I was going through the messages. I asked her if we could meet privately to talk, and she was hesitant at first, and then I told her that I have something to tell her about her husband. Then she agreed, and we decided to meet at a quiet cafe. As I started to share the truth with Mandy, her face went through a roller coaster of emotions, from shock to disbelief, and finally, heartbreak. It was clear that this revelation was painful for her to take in. Despite the heartache, Mandy appreciated me telling her the truth. She deserved to know what was happening behind her back, and I hoped she would gather the strength to confront her cheating husband and find a better path for herself. Seeking revenge can be a risky game, but I wanted Jacob to understand the pain he caused both me and Mandy, so I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. I created a fake social media account and began flirting with Jacob, knowing he wouldn't be able to resist. I portrayed myself as a single woman looking for excitement and adventure. Sure enough, Jacob fell right into the trap, and we started chatting regularly. I couldn't help but think about how Ella would react when she discovers that her supposed true love is also cheating on her. I played my part to perfection, leading Jacob on and making him believe that there was a real chance for something more between us. I could tell he was excited and eager to meet in person. That's when I decided to drop the bombshell. I revealed my true identity and confronted him about the affair with Ella. To make things even more intense, I asked Mandy to be there with me, and I also ensured that Ella would be present too. When we all got there, the expressions on Ella's and Jacob's faces were absolutely priceless. Mandy didn't hold back and told Jacob that she was divorcing him and done with their relationship. At the same time, I didn't spare Ella the truth either. I let her know that her so-called lover Jacob had come to meet me, thinking I was a woman to hook up with. To add to the drama, I handed over the divorce papers to her. The shock and guilt in Jacob's voice were evident as he tried to explain himself, but I wasn't interested in his excuses. I wanted him to feel the same pain he caused others. After that confrontation, I cut all contact and walked away, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Ella looked equally confused, and she started to cry, begging me to stay and that she still loved me. I didn't believe anything she said. I told her that I will give her a week to pack up and leave from my house, and I walked away. It felt amazing to get back at her, and moreover, it felt amazing to pick myself up for once. I deserve better, and I know it. In the weeks that followed, the pain slowly began to subside, and I focused on rebuilding my life. With the support of friends and family, I rediscovered the person I was before the betrayal, and I started to heal. During this time, I also took the necessary steps to finalize my divorce from Ella. It was a challenging process emotionally, but I knew it was the right decision for my own well-being and happiness. As for Mandy, she and I developed a strong bond of friendship. Going through similar experiences had connected us in a unique way, and we both found solace in each other's company. Mandy decided to move on from the painful chapter of her life and focus on her own growth and happiness. In the months that followed, I immersed myself in new hobbies, career opportunities, and social activities. I surrounded myself with positive influences and took the time to rediscover what truly made me happy. Through self-reflection and personal growth, I came to realize that my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's actions or choices. I learned to love and value myself, and that newfound self-respect allowed me to attract healthier relationships into my life. Eventually, I met someone new. A kind, understanding, and loyal person who appreciated me for who I was and treated me with the love and respect I deserved. We took things slowly, allowing trust and affection to blossom naturally. This relationship taught me that there is hope for love after heartbreak, and that the right person can come into your life when you least expect it. As for Ella and Jacob, I heard through the grapevine that their relationship was short-lived after the confrontation. The trust they once had in each other was irrevocably shattered, and they went their separate ways. In the end, I chose not to dwell on revenge or bitterness. Instead, I focused on my own growth and happiness. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, forgiveness, and the importance of prioritizing self-love. I want to say that I'm truly sorry you had to go through such a painful experience. Discovering infidelity in a relationship can be devastating, and it takes a lot of courage to confront the situation head-on like you did. It's understandable that you wanted Jacob to understand the consequences of his actions and to feel the pain he caused others. Your decision to expose the truth to Jacob's wife, Mandy, was incredibly brave and considerate. By doing so, you not only stood up for yourself, but also saved her from continuing a relationship with a cheater. Ending things with Ella may have been tough, but it's evident that you realized your self-worth, and that you deserve better than being treated that way. Putting yourself first and choosing to walk away from a toxic situation was the right thing to do. You should never settle for anything less than a loving and faithful partner who respects you. It's important to remember that healing from this experience will take time, but know that you made the right choices for your own well-being. As you move forward, may you find the happiness and love you truly deserve, surrounded by people who genuinely appreciate and care for you. You've shown strength and integrity throughout this ordeal, and I truly sympathize with what you've been through. Keep your head high and remember that better things await you on the horizon. With this new person you've met, continue to take things slowly and make sure to look out for any red flags. Thank you for sharing with us. Now let's get into our second story for today. So, my wife and I have been married for 11 years, and we have 2 daughters aged 10 and 11. The other day, I was online taking care of some minor medical stuff when I noticed some appointments on the list that I wasn't aware of, appointments for my wife. I saw one for her being 6 weeks pregnant and another for her having an abortion. I was completely taken aback by this discovery. Later that night, I decided to ask her about it. I wanted to know if she had any plans to tell me about the pregnancy. Our conversation became a bit intense, with her asking me questions and me trying to understand why she hadn't shared this with me earlier. I mentioned the abortion as well, and we went back and forth discussing how I found out and what led to this situation. Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even considering the possibility of someone else being involved. You see, I had a vasectomy a few years back, and I had a follow-up appointment to confirm that the procedure was successful. Of course, I'm aware that vasectomies can sometimes reverse themselves, but it didn't immediately cross my mind. As the story continues, I'm doing my best to be supportive, even though I'm not particularly upset about anything except for the fact that she kept this from me. Then, she drops a bombshell. She confesses that she was afraid to tell me about the pregnancy, because she wasn't sure if I was the father. It turns out she's been having unprotected sex with a coworker in the back of her car. She works nights for the past 6 months. I was completely blindsided by this affair. According to her, she regrets the decision to have an abortion, which happened back in early November. Shockingly, she admits that she continued to have sex with him, even a couple of times in February. Right now, she's an emotional mess, and although I really want to comfort her, I'm trying to stay strong. It's hard to come to terms with what she's done. She's the one who made these choices, and now she has to face the consequences. I want to make it clear that I don't blame myself for what happened. It was her decision, her actions, and her mistakes. Even though this all unfolded just earlier this week, I'm feeling incredibly torn up inside. I still love this woman deeply, but I can't overlook or forgive what she did. Our 11 years of building a relationship and trust seem to have crumbled in a single day. My priority now is her well-being, but I've come to the realization that I can't be the one to provide that for her anymore. I've already expressed my desire for a separation, and I've asked her to move out. I live in a home that I rent from my mother, and part of the agreement is that I also help take care of my grandmother, who lives with us. It would be incredibly awkward for her to stay here once the rest of the family knows about the situation. However, even if my grandmother didn't live with us, I would still ask her to move out. My mindset is that I didn't cheat, so why should I be the one to uproot my life? It's a difficult and emotional situation, but I know I need to prioritize my own well-being and make decisions that are right for me moving forward. I've reached out to a lawyer, and I'm in the process of gathering information for the separation papers. I've also taken the responsible step of getting tested for STDs, and fortunately, the results so far have been clean. I haven't told my children about the situation yet. My soon-to-be ex wanted to downplay it as just a breakup, but I firmly believe they need to understand the seriousness of a marriage, so I plan to be honest with them about the fact that their mother had a boyfriend. She started crying and told me to not tell anyone about the reason for the breakup, and especially not the kids. Her words were falling to deaf ears. I was the one who was supposed to be crying and asking her why she did what she did, but here I am making calls to my immediate family telling them that me and my wife are splitting up and the reason is because she cheated on me, and she is pregnant with another man's child. I still haven't met this man, and I have no intentions to meet him either. He can take my ex and leave my daughters to me. My mother-in-law called me and apologized on behalf of my ex and told her that she is stupid for doing this to such a good man. I didn't know what to say either. I loved her family dearly and they picked my side too. They said that they completely cut off ties with her, and that she deserves to suffer the consequences. I later kicked her out of the house and said I will be taking full custody of the kids and now she can go live with that coworker of hers. She didn't utter a word after that. This whole experience has been incredibly tough on me. I feel like I'm barely holding myself together, especially today. I'm trying to maintain a strong front in front of my daughters, but there are moments when I have to step away to collect myself. It's been a few weeks since I last heard from my ex and things have been going pretty well for me. The custody case for my 2 girls seems to be in my favor and they are coping with everything remarkably well. I'm relieved that I can finally find happiness in the company of just my girls and myself. OP, I want to extend my deepest sympathies to you for the heartbreak and pain you're going through. It takes immense courage to confront such a difficult situation head-on and prioritize the well-being of your 2 daughters. Please know that what you did was absolutely the right thing. It's clear that you care deeply for your girls and want to teach them the importance of honesty and commitment in a marriage. While the road ahead may be tough, I believe you and your daughters will be better off without your ex-wife's actions and betrayal in your lives. With time, wounds will heal and you'll find happiness again. Stay strong and remember that you have made a decision that reflects your strength and love for your family. Your resilience will undoubtedly lead to brighter days ahead. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I, 32, male, was married to my ex-wife, 28, female, for 2 years. It still shocks me that after all the promises my ex-wife made to me, she stooped so low and cheated on me. My wife and I first met at my cousin's college graduation ceremony. She had also come to attend her brother's graduation, and we got along well. After the ceremony, she gave me her number at request, but it took me weeks for her to finally take my calls. After weeks of her not taking my calls, I coincidentally bumped into her one day, and she apologized for not taking my calls, and offered that we should go to the movies together. Going to the movies was our first date, and from there, multiple dates followed, and we ended up marrying after a year of dating. In the beginning, marrying my wife brought me so much happiness. She ticked all my boxes, and everything was smooth between us. She was great in bed, a good cook, and she took good care of me. We were always so happy together, and I loved what we shared. While my wife worked as a data entry clerk, I worked as a heavy machine technician, and what we earned was enough to take care of us. Aside from being happy that I married my wife, I was also glad she had a great family. I grew up with my dad, and he raised me as a single parent, and the only cousin I had was my dad's younger sister's daughter. One of the things I always looked forward to was a family of love, and that's what my wife had. She had 2 brothers and 1 sister, plus her parents. Her family were so close to each other, and since we all lived in the same town, we used to hang out once every month as a family unit. Whenever we had a picnic, family dinner, or a gathering, all of my wife's siblings would come with their spouses, and this was how I got close to one of her brother-in-laws, my wife's sister's husband. We were around the same age, which allowed us to bond well. Most times, if my wife and her sister were hanging out or going out of town for the wedding of a mutual friend or an extended family member, her brother-in-law, and I would go out for a couple of drinks or watch football together. As time passed, he wasn't just my favorite brother-in-law, we became very good friends. Months after my wife and I clocked a year together, I noticed she was getting closer to her sister's husband. It's not like there was anything wrong with being close to her sister's husband, but I felt something was different with their relationship, and some other changes followed. For example, if we went for a family dinner, my wife would talk to everybody except her brother-in-law, which was very unlike her. And if her brother-in-law and I were hanging out, and I mentioned my wife in our conversation, he would avoid the topic and chip in something else. Regarding their closeness, if we all went somewhere, maybe the park or shopping mall, my wife would prefer to hang with her sister and husband than with me. If we sat at a table to eat together, she would prefer to sit next to him and leave me alone wherever I was. I quietly watched her for months to ensure my head was not messing with me. Around the same time, I noticed all these changes. My wife's attitude towards me changed, too. It got so bad that we could not converse without her mentioning her brother-in-law's name. Our intimacy dropped, too, and she barely allowed me to touch her. Whenever I tried to, she'd complain about being tired or not being in the mood. Sometimes, she'd even say she was seeing her monthly flow even when I knew she wasn't. Before I suspected something was going on between her and her brother-in-law, my wife did not care about her looks whenever we wanted to hang out as a family unit, but she suddenly became so concerned. She'd wash and curl her hair in advance, pick out a dress that would expose her thighs and cleavages, and apply makeup. It became evident that she was trying to look good for a reason, and even her sister and other family members noticed the great difference. The whole time, I had been suspecting my wife. Deep down, I wanted to be wrong. But one night, after waiting for almost an hour for her to stop chatting and blushing on her phone and spend time with me, she said she was tired as usual and slept off. I was so hurt by her actions and neglect that I went through her phone to see who had been making her blush like that. When I accessed her phone and went through her social media accounts, I stumbled on her messages on WhatsApp with her sister's husband. She saved his name as Bestie with 3 love emojis, and I suspected he was the one before I opened their conversation. I could not believe what I saw when I went through their conversation. Not only was my wife having an affair with her BIL, as I suspected, but they had also exchanged nudes. Even that evening, he had sent her pictures of his private part, and wrote a long erotic text of all the nasty things he would do to her when they met again. They planned to meet in a cheap motel in 2 days, and they kept recounting their last escapade together. I was so disappointed and didn't know how to feel. To even think that they were making jokes about her getting pregnant for him and keeping the child. I felt so betrayed. At that moment, I felt like stuffing her with a pillow. I had to control my anger because she wasn't worth getting a life sentence for. Shortly after I was done with my emotional meltdown, I had an idea to teach her a lesson. So I took screenshots of their conversation, especially the parts where he sent her his nudes, and they mentioned meeting at the motel to have fun. Then I cleared all traces that I went through her chats. That night I couldn't sleep at home because I was hurt and kept crying like a baby. Even though I suspected something was fishy, I still could not believe my wife would break me like that after all our promises to each other. The following day, I went to work from the motel I spent the night at, and she kept calling me the whole morning to find out why I wasn't at home when she woke up. I cooked up a lie for her, and I told her I'd be home after work. When I got home that evening, she could tell something was wrong, but I told her I had a bad day at work. Meanwhile, the following day, she had planned to meet with my BIL at the motel. She didn't know I had called her sister and explained everything. She was more shocked than I was and promised she would not confront her husband. Also, I created a WhatsApp group chat, added all her close family members to it, and told them everything I found out. I dropped the screenshots I took there so everyone could see, and they couldn't believe it. Her sister kept doubting that my wife would do such a thing to her. After everyone was out of their shock phase, we all planned to go to the location of the motel they would be using so we could catch them in the act. On D-Day, which was a Saturday, I watched as my wife dressed her best, did her makeup, and lied to me about going to see one of her old-time friends who had just given birth. I acted all calm and watched her as she left. About 10 minutes after she left, I drove to the location and notified her family that she was on the move. Eventually, we all rendered vows at the motel as planned and decided to go to her room. There were 5 of us, excluding her father. When we got to her room, I knocked and pretended to be room service, and she opened the door with a white towel wrapped around her chest. The moment she saw that I was the one, she froze. Then we all entered the room one after the other. Her BIL was in the bathroom, and when he heard voices and came out to see us, he ran back into the bathroom and refused to come out. My sister-in-law was so heartbroken, and she attacked my wife. Right there, I told her to her face to not bother coming home and that she'd be hearing from my lawyer soon. Her mom and brothers could not even say anything to her. They all stood there in awe. I left the room and left them there so she could deal with her family. Immediately I got home, I threw her stuff out of my house and contacted a divorce lawyer to start processing our divorce papers. She tried to call me and beg a couple of times, and I told her she was insane to think I'd take back a shameless cheat like her. The worst was that she had no one to turn to, her family disowned her, and her sister cut all ties with her because she couldn't handle the betrayal. I had to divorce her and officially get rid of her. Her sister also divorced her husband, and my wife had to move in with her friend before she left town. Later, I found out that their affair started under my roof, and they had it going long before I suspected something was happening. My wife claimed she continued the affair with her BIL because he was not as boring as me. I guess she will have enough fun living with disappointed family members for the rest of her life. I'm fine now, but I decided to not marry again. It's better to be alone so I don't experience such disappointment and heartbreak again. OP, you did a great thing by divorcing your ex-wife, and her sister did the right thing. Indeed, she is a shameless cheat, and had no shame in cheating with her sister's husband. Ignore what she said, OP. You being boring had nothing to do with this. She only used that as an excuse. It's a stupid excuse, by the way. You should be glad you found out earlier. If not, you would have raised her BIL's child. Concerning marrying again, it's all up to you. You don't have to if you don't want to. Most women have no shame. Sadly, it's becoming a norm. Anyways, I'm happy to hear you're doing better. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now let's move on to the next story of the day. My name is Lucas. My ex-wife, Arya, and I were married for 3 years before we went our separate ways. Arya and I lived in the same town, but I did not know her until I was 25. Even with that, we didn't start dating until 4 years ago. We dated for a year, and we married for 3 years. I know this might sound simple-like, but meeting Arya was love at first sight. I liked her the instant I met her, and I had this conviction that she would be the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. She was intelligent, hardworking, and pretty, and I felt we were a match made in heaven. Even though she gave me a tough time before we dated, I didn't mind waiting for her until she was mine. Fast forward to after we got married. I was literally the happiest man on earth. Although I did not express myself so much, I was glad we were finally married. Everything was blissful for the first 2 years and some months of our marriage. We enjoyed each other's company and literally did everything together. For a long time, I had been hoping to find a woman who would love me wholeheartedly, and when Arya came into my life, I was relieved. While we were married, Arya and I didn't have so many issues, and also we knew it was very normal for us to butt heads from time to time, and we understood that. We tried as much as possible to settle whatever issue we had before we got to the extent of keeping malice with each other. Arya was someone who loved to hang out and party with her friends, and I was someone who loved to stay home and watch television. I barely went out except it was extremely important. In fact, I would prefer to cancel on my friends and stay at home to rest or do something for myself. For once, I never stopped Arya from doing her thing. I supported her and allowed her to go out with her friends as much as she wanted during weekdays, and then on weekends, we would spend quality time together at home. The reason I never had issues with her always going out with her friends was because I trusted her, and I didn't expect that she would do anything to hurt me or even cheat on me. I also kept to my promise, and didn't do anything that would hurt Arya. Even before we married, I stopped talking to a couple of girls I used to, not because they were bad people, but because hanging around them always would lead me to temptation. Also, Arya had told me about her ex-boyfriend and how she was hurt and heartbroken when she found out he was cheating on her with multiple partners, and I didn't want to cause her that kind of pain again. This was why she didn't say yes to me the first few times I asked her out. She claimed she was still deeply hurt and needed to be sure she had healed properly before entering another relationship. I had also been hurt in my previous relationship, but that was a very long time ago, so I could relate to her feelings, and we assured each other that we would never cheat or do anything that would cause us pain. We agreed to not have kids yet because we wanted to spend time with ourselves and ensure that we were not holding ourselves back so our kids would enjoy the full love of their parents. Things were fine between us, and even as Arya continued to go out, I never suspected anything off. Nothing changed about her, she still acted, dressed, took care of me, and did her wifely duties. So, I was so shocked one day when I received a call from a friend of mine to come and take my wife. This friend of mine who called was a hotel manager in a very popular tourist hotel in our town. We lived in a very small town, so almost everyone, young and old, knew the hotel. When he called me to come and get my wife from the hotel, I was shocked because that wasn't where Arya told me she was going. She told me she was hanging out with her other girlfriends at one of their friends' family restaurants. I even dropped her there myself. At first I tried to explain to him that he was mistaken and might have been someone who looked like Arya, but he insisted that she was the one and that I should come over. The distance from the restaurant where I dropped Arya was almost a 45-minute drive to the hotel, meaning she left immediately after I dropped her there. Confused and curious to find out what was happening, I drove to the hotel and found Arya there. She was with an employee of the hotel, and the police were already involved. When I asked them to explain what was going on, I was informed that she was trespassing and that the employee I saw her with promised to give her a free room. They planned to spend hours together, but somehow they were caught. I was so surprised and disappointed at the same time. It felt like a dream or a prank. I wanted to say something like, "We were only pulling your legs," but when that didn't happen, it struck me that Arya had been cheating on me the whole while. In addition, the employee confessed that it wasn't the first time they did so, and it had been going on for weeks. Meanwhile, while the employee confessed, Arya was already on her knees, begging me not to listen to them that she was being framed. I knew she was lying because she wasn't kidnapped to the hotel. She went there by herself to sleep with the employee. Since the manager was my friend, he wanted to let me know before he pressed charges. I was so embarrassed and heartbroken, and I even encouraged him to press charges so he could deal with Arya as he wanted. Arya was shocked when she heard my response, and her tears intensified. She begged me to talk to my friend, but my mind was made up. When she saw that I wasn't begging my friend, she begged me to take her home. I didn't say anything to her, and I watched as she cried and begged. Her affair partner was fired on the spot, and they were both arrested. To humiliate her more, I recorded her and her affair partner as they were being arrested, and after they were taken away, I posted it online. I also posted and announced on our local town's Facebook group that she was cheating on me and having an affair at a hotel with an employee. Most people in the group knew us, and that's how the news got to everyone. By the time she was bailed by her parents, she and her affair partner were the talk of town, and they faced a lot of ridicule. It was very shameful that even her close friends deserted her. It was hilarious when she tried to come home and beg me. She said she couldn't explain what pushed her to cheat on me and that she was so sorry. She claimed she still loved me and wanted us to work out, but I told her it wasn't possible. Even after she took her things out of my house and we divorced, she kept begging and crying. She even asked her best friend to try and talk to me, but I warned her and asked her to leave my house. It's been 1 year since it happened, but it still feels like yesterday. I'm having a tough time moving on, but I know that one day this will be a long-forgotten history. As for her affair partner, I don't know what happened to him, but I do know Arya did not end up with him. OP, I must admit that your ex-wife was a pretty good liar. People don't just wake up and realize they cheated on their partners. They do it with their senses intact. They do it for a reason, and your ex-wife only tried to manipulate you by saying she didn't know what pushed her. It's a good thing you didn't fall for such cheap lies, and you need to move on. I'm sure your ex-wife has moved on, and you're already history to her, so do yourself a favor and get out of the past. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.